I'm Barb Crist, a licensed Unity teacher here, if you don't know me. And it's my pleasure to be the surprise. I'm a surprise. I'm not too big a surprise, though, am I? This morning, I'd like to begin with a story that happened to me a week ago Friday. And hopefully I can do this without getting into too many details. But my mother-in-law wasn't feeling well. And the night before, she and I had talked, and the plan was that I'd take her to a doctor appointment in the afternoon on Friday. But come that morning, she felt worse, and she was confused and drove herself to the clinic. And when I found that out, I drove to Hastings to be with her, and found out that they were so booked she couldn't get in until her appointment. So we had like 4 hours to kill, and I realized that, well, let's just go home and have a nap and have some lunch and then come back when it's time. But I don't have a key or any way to get into her house, and she didn't have a key. She only had her car with a built-in garage door opener, so I drove her car, big Cadillac. And we went home and did those things and then came back to the appointment. And she was diagnosed with pneumonia. She gets that very easily. So after the appointment, I took her home where she could rest while I got to run some errands. And one thing I needed to do was get her prescriptions and also a quick trip to the hardware store to get a few duplicate keys made. Somewhere in there, I had the thought, hey, how's this going to work? I'm driving her car, and eventually I'm going to need to get to the other side of town back to my own car so I can go home. So in the hardware store, I just had these thoughts of, people are good. This is a small town. People will want to help, right? So the young clerk that was making my key, I asked her, are there any taxi services in Hastings? And she said, well, no. And then another young clerk came up and said, well, yeah, there are. You can call the airport taxi service, and they'll take you out to the airport. It's not exactly what I wanted to do. And then a third clerk came over and said, well, there's Sober Ride. Didn't need that. So I just asked. I said, would one of you be willing to be my taxi driver? I just need a ride from here to the other side of town, over by the hospital, to get to my car. And the gal making my key said, sure, she would love to do that. She gets up at 4:30. I said, great, I'll be back here. It was a busy day. I ran and did a few more things and got her meds and went back and talked with my mother-in-law some more and got her mail and got things kind of settled and then sprinted off to the hardware store. It's really close by car. And one thing you don't notice when you're in a car is there's no shoveled sidewalks, but I was late, but she waited for me. And she saw me coming, and so she drove to meet me on the road. She rolled down her window, well, push button, I guess, and said, do you need a lift? And I said, you're an angel. You are an angel. And I got in, and we talked. It's probably a 10-minute drive over there, and I got out my wallet because I wanted to pay her. That was my whole thing about feeling good. I'd love to give people things, and that would feel good to offer some cash to this young woman who was working at a hardware store. And she said, no, I don't want your money. And she asked me, have you ever seen the movie Pay It Forward? I said, I love that movie. So did she. Her name is Nikki. And she told me a story about a month before. She'd been in the dairy store and gotten milk and cheese and things and got to the cash register, and they don't take credit cards there. And she didn't have enough to pay for that. So the customer behind her offered to buy her groceries and did buy her groceries for her and just said, pay it forward sometime. Yeah, isn't that nice? And she chose me to pay it forward to, which felt really nice to me. I knew I would have great feelings about giving her some money, but I felt even better watching her expression doing that for me. So it truly was a miracle. And I just wanted to tell you that story because if you haven't been a part of a Pay It Forward, go do it. Either side, it's a win-win. It's just beautiful. So give it a try. But this morning, my talk is called Get Over It. And I know that's kind of sarcastic, a little harsh maybe. And it's not something I would normally say. But, and furthermore, when I hear get over it, I get a little defensive. I don't know about you. I know a lot of people, my mother-in-law included, who has pneumonia right now, people with influenza, and they can't just get over it. Take some rest, some time, maybe some antibiotics, some chicken soup, things take time. So let's just join together in putting that defensiveness aside and all those yes buts, and it's not really the kind of situation I want to talk about anyway. What I do want to talk about is how we use words and how we talk about things. Common expressions and popular sayings that we use without really thinking about what we're saying. We might be communicating something that we don't really believe. So a therapist once told me to pay attention to people's behaviors and their actions more than their words. That's more truth. In Unity, we do pay a lot of attention to people's actions and choices, but we also place importance on our words. Words are powerful. So we want to be able to choose the right words that articulate really what we think and believe. I've been reviewing this little book, Get Over It, and that's where the title came from. It's written by Dr. Bill Holton and Reverend Paul Hasselbeck, who is also a doctor. Now, Dr. Bill Holton is a licensed Unity teacher, and he's a spiritual co-leader at a Unity church in North Carolina, Durham, North Carolina. I don't know him, but I do know Reverend Paul. Paul is the dean at Unity Village of the spiritual education and enrichment program that I've been through, and many of you have taken some of these classes. He's a professor of metaphysics. You can hear him on Unity FM radio. He is a kick. He's so funny and so intellectual and intelligent and wise. He just blows me away with his humor and his intellect. I love him deeply. I've had 6, 7, maybe 8 classes from him at Unity Village, so it's a lot of work when he's your teacher. And also sat in his meditations. He leads a 6:30 a.m. morning meditation every day at the village. And I've probably been in 30 or 40 of those. And maybe more than anything, I am drawn to his Christ light. The spiritual nature of the man is very precious. So get over it is something that Paul would ask students all the time. Or he really challenged us. What do you believe? And does what you say actually match up to what you believe about your spirituality? Are you stuck using old vocabulary with these new spiritual awarenesses that you have? Do they work anymore? So this book lists about 25 common expressions that we've all heard and probably said many, many times. So this morning I want to talk about maybe 6 or 7 of them and hope that you will just take a look and hope that you put that defensiveness aside. I know that I have to. The first one, okay. How many of you have been hit by a cosmic 2x4? Or know someone who has? Yeah. Well, think about it for a minute. Hit by a cosmic 2x4. It's cute, it gets a laugh, but do you really believe that there's a force outside yourself that punishes you so that you can learn some life lesson. I don't think we really believe that. There's not a puppet master out there pulling strings in our lives. We have free will, and we take responsibility for our thoughts and our words and our actions. We don't believe that God punishes us for our own good, and there is no cosmic 2x4. If there is a 2x4, it's in our own hand, right? We make the poor decision, and then we experience some yucky results from that. And if we don't learn from our mistakes, then we probably keep making bad decisions and keep having bad consequences rolling at us. So until and if we get some insight into the situation or change our perspective, and when that happens, we might call it a spiritual awakening or an aha moment. And now we can call it this: I've created a 2x4 moment. The next saying is one of my favorites, really. I use this all the time. I'm right where I'm supposed to be. Isn't that so comforting? I love it. I'm right where I'm supposed to be, talking to you, and you're right where you're supposed to be here at Unity of the Valley this morning. What could be wrong with that? Well, it's the part primarily about supposed to be. That's the problem. It sounds a lot like we're shooting ourselves. I'm supposed to eat a lot of vegetables. I'm supposed to do good, I'm supposed to do the right thing. All that supposed to and shoulding can trigger guilt and shame. So let's just let that shoulding go. That whole saying is kind of similar to the cosmic 2x4. There is no force outside ourselves that predetermines where we're supposed to be. I am where I am, and you are where you are, right now, in this moment. And we are where we are because of the choices, the actions that we've made that have brought us here. Our lives aren't predetermined. Our lives unfold based on our consciousness and our awareness. So I'm going to have to change what I say. Maybe you will too, because I like this new phrase. I am right where I choose to be. Isn't that powerful? I like it. Do you want to say it with me? I am right where I choose to be. The next phase is, it is what it is. Yeah, like get used to it. That's the way it is. When I first read this, I pictured Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh, that gloomy donkey. It is what it is. I might have known. The point here is not to use this line as an excuse to stay stuck. Things aren't happening because they're supposed to happen. Things happen because of our choices, our actions, our words, and how they interact with the choices and words and actions of other people. We have personal power, and we have control of our thoughts. We get to name our experience. It's up to us what we want to call it. We might label something bad, and then we think of all sorts of things to support that belief. Or we might look at something as good, and then we might call it good. And we got a chance to practice that in the meditation this morning. You were calling all sorts of things good, weren't you? And that's what this way of rephrasing it is. It is what I call it. And I tell you, this week, I loved this. It was a great turnaround for me with the health of my mother-in-law and the stress that my husband was under. It would have been easy to call this week and these circumstances a lot of tough and difficult names. And instead, I said, hey, it is what I call it. It is the circle of life, and it is okay, and I'm okay. It's powerful when we can use these tools to support ourselves through life's challenges. Birds of a feather flock together. Heard that one a million times. And opposites attract. Yeah. both of these sayings are just ingrained in our culture, aren't they? They're true, right? Well, the authors remind us that whether people are like us or unlike us, we choose. We choose who we want to be with. We choose the groups we want to join and be active in. We choose who we want to be friends with. We're called not to flock, but to express our goodness and shine our Christ light in the world. So, our new saying is, we choose who to flock with. You don't like that? All right. Take what you like. Oh, here's a good one. Have you heard this? Be careful what you pray for. I even heard an addendum on the end. You might get it. It's kind of like a warning or something. If you don't say your prayer just right, it might backfire on you. You forgot to say blah, 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 and that's why this happened. I'm thinking that's sort of magical thinking. It's not the truth. That kind of thinking builds anxiety and fear all around the whole prayer process. And it implies that you could do something bad or wrong, get a bad outcome, and there's no reason to be afraid to pray. We don't pray to get an outside genie like God to grant our wishes. We pray to remember what we are, that divine oneness that is God. We pray affirmatively in unity, knowing that we are one divine substance. This is a direct quote from the little book. The point of prayer is not the goodies we get, but the goodness we realize we are. So here's our new saying. Pray from the awareness of oneness. I know you've heard that because I've been saying that in meditation for a long time. And it's a beautiful phrase to know and use. We got time, I think, for just a couple more. The next saying is, all things work together for good. That's another one of my favorites. But it's kind of the same story as these other sayings, that saying that all things work together for good assumes that there's a God out there orchestrating everything, waving a magic wand, making everything come together, keeping us safe, guaranteeing that it'll all be right. But terrible and disturbing things happen in our world that nobody could call good. There are things this past month that just break our hearts. The headlines are full of tragedies. And so it's up to each one of us to call forth the goodness and bring it out into the human experience. Gandhi's quote, "Be the change you want to be in the world." So let's change this saying to something more positive and affirming. I work things together for good. We work things together for good. When I think about this too, I think about the prayer of enfoldment that we say at the end of service. That was originally called the prayer of protection, and Audrey said, we can't call it that. We call it the prayer of enfoldment. That's a little more inclusive. But that prayer is written, first, just my disclaimer, I love that prayer, but it's written in old language. God's power and protection surrounding us and enfolding us, and we become disempowered, and God has all the power the way we said it. So we created a second verse that we show and say, I am light, I am love, I am power, I am the presence in this world. Wherever I am, God is. That is powerful, and we claim that Christ light that we are. Sometimes we tack on a saying at the end, and all is well. You may notice I never say that. I don't like that. You can if you want to, but to me that diminishes the power of those affirmative statements that come before it. And I just want to say again how much I love that prayer. And when I'm in the hospital room with my mother-in-law, I say it the old way, because it just, and then I move into the new way. So it's a process of accepting these new kinds of ways to talk about things. So, where am I? The last thing, yeah. That which you seek is seeking you. Have you heard that one? This phrase assumes that as we seek God, God is seeking us. And seeking implies distance. And we know we're not distance from God. We're one with God, right? There is no separation. We're not separate. And God is right here at the point of us at all times. Here's a quote from Ernest Holmes. He's the founder of Christian Science and a great American spiritual writer and teacher. Religious science. Sorry. Yeah. Not to be confused with Scientology. No. Anyway, dear Mr. Holmes said, the thing we are looking for is the thing we are looking with. I love that. We are it. So the new phase is that which you seek, you already are. You seek peace in your life, close your eyes, breathe, you are peace. You seek love in your life, you are love already. Powerful ways to look at our lives. I just want to close now by repeating these powerful truth statements. I'll give you a second to take them in. I've created a 2x4 moment. I'm right where I choose to be. It is what I call it. I choose who I flock with. I pray from the awareness of oneness. I work all things together for good. That which I seek, I already am. And so it is.